Okay, friends, today we are going to have a discussion on impact of global pandemic crisis situation, which is arise due to COVID-19, its impact on pharmaceutical industry with special focus on contract research organization industry. So friends, since last three and a half months, I think the entire world has come to a standstill because of this global pandemic crisis situation. And now is a time when we need to learn to live with this virus. So slowly all the businesses need to reopen. And in fact, most of the country, most of the major economies are under phase of reopening in a phased manner. So India is also gearing up for, already yesterday it has been announced about lockdown 4.0. But with that, we are going to open up businesses across country in a phased manner. So it's an apt time to discuss about the preparedness of contract research organization across country. And we are really glad that today we have with us Dr. Mahesh Bhalgat, who is a Chief Operating Officer, CEO of Syngene International. Syngene is an internationally recognized contract research organization and a manufacturing organization. They have capabilities in medicinal chemistry, pharmacology, in vivo pharmacology, cGMP, manufacturing, analytical R&D, formulation and analytical R&D, and many other areas they have their capabilities in. Dr. Ramesh Bhalgat is having more than 25 years of experience in pharmaceutical industry with expertise in manufacturing operations, supply chain, administrative services. And it is very important for me to mention that he's recognized for his contribution in commercialization of diagnostic kits, biopharmaceuticals, and WHO pre-qualification of vaccines. So he's having a lot of biotechnology background as well. And along with him, we have Dr. Kiran Marthak, who is an industry veteran and a very reputed senior clinical scientist with more than 14 years of CRO industry experience in clinical research organizations. And overall, he is having more than 35 years of experience of pharmaceutical industry with special focus on clinical research. So we are very glad that we have two industry leaders, experts today to discuss on impact of COVID-19 on CRO industry. So to start with, I would request Dr. Mahesh for his opening remarks and what do you feel about impact overall globally on pharmaceutical industry, and then if you can cover up the impact on contract research organizations as well.
Yeah, good day everyone, and thank you Deepak for hosting such an interesting discussion on this topic, which is really relevant, especially as we are seeing that day to day there is new information that is coming around, and there is new ways that we need to learn to deal with COVID-19. As the pharmaceutical industry, I think our first and foremost approach should be what is it that we can do to help in this scenario. But before I get into that, I just want to set a little bit of the context in terms of not too many numbers, but I do want to share a couple of numbers around, what is it that we are seeing as the approach and the impact coming from APIs. Today, we know that about 80% of APIs are still coming from China. And that in itself is a big challenge for the pharmaceutical industry to deal with. Now, what COVID-19 has done is made us revisit many different areas. I only picked one number, but the areas that we will have to revisit is not just sourcing of APIs, which is obviously something that everybody has started talking about, but the additional area that we will have to visit is where and how do we make our diagnostic kits, and what is the verticalization opportunity that is there in the diagnostics industry. Next, we will have to revisit what is the opportunity and what is the requirement to continue to manage the clinical trials that we have been getting more and more into in the last few years in the Indian environment and in the Indian context. Lots of this is going to require looking internally within our organizations, what are the practices that we change? What are the approaches that we now adapt to live with the COVID-19 scenario? It's also going to take a lot more of the support from the government from a policy setting perspective, financial support perspective, and the overall ecosystem development. The last bit that we should make sure that we cover as we talk about the impact of COVID-19 is on patients. How do we make sure that patients get the right information with regards to the value of the tests that they're performing, the value of the medicines that they're getting, the vaccines that will come out of this effort, and therefore the long-term sustainability of this environment in the Indian context for the Indian patients? Because at the end of the day, anything that we do needs to put the patient at the center of this. And so with those comments, I'll just say that we do need to cover these different topics as we talk about COVID-19 impact to the pharmaceutical industry.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh. So, Dr. Kiran, would you like to add a few things, especially from clinical research organization perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bharat, for inviting me for this discussion, which is so important. And everybody in the world is being affected with this particular disease. If either by suffering with the disease or by, particularly the pharma industry or for the clinical research about finding out the treatment for COVID-19. Now, this is something which has taken the world by a total surprise. Though there were certain times, there were indications even in US at one time to work on some pandemics if it arises and what kind of work needs to be carried out. But at present, with the seriousness and the situation, I feel that all the pharmaceutical companies or the biotech companies, they have come together to work for a treatment of COVID-19. As per what I have learned from our reliable sources, is that as many as about 35 treatments and vaccine, which is being at present tried for COVID-19 patients. And this, out of these 35, some may be already in the market, but there is an additional indication being tried out. Some are in clinical trial with the potential of being used, that can be used for COVID-19 cases. And then, of course, the vaccines, and the companies are trying to develop vaccines in such a way that it can come in the market at a very short period. And they are making use of the already available vaccines in the market and how to make use of it for COVID-19 vaccine as such. As per what is there in the clinicaltrials.gov in US FDA site, there are as many as more than 385,000 studies. I'm saying 385,000 studies already being going on for coronavirus infection. That's only in US. Plus, there are as many as 210 countries where the clinical trials are being conducted for the COVID-19 treatment or for vaccines. So that shows the gravity of the situation. And that is where the various CROs, the pharma industries, they all are doing their best to see that something comes in the market as early as possible. They are in the various stages of development, and hopefully something should come out as early as possible so that the patients can be treated very well.
You know, I'd like to add with regards to what Dr. Kiran just mentioned. So we've seen a huge surge in the number of studies that are initiated. Of course, almost all of these, or a very large percentage of these, are related to COVID-19. However, let's also look at the overall clinical environment that has changed, because I was looking at some data from Medidata. which is publishing numbers for March. In March, we had a 65% worldwide average decrease in patient enrollment. And among this, 43% decrease was in Japan and 84% was a reduction in India, with the US down an average of about 67%. It's really important for us to understand this backdrop that is there, because what is going to happen if we focus and this conversation a little bit more on the clinical trial impact part of it, we are going to have challenges in patient recruitment. We are going to have challenges with regards to our safety studies as well, because as more and more of the world population is hit with the infection, it is going to be difficult to identify patients who are naive and therefore are qualified for safety studies. Let alone that as a challenge, we are also then of course going to have to make sure that we are able to conduct these studies in an environment with all of the norms that we have now getting used to, which is social distancing, temperature monitoring, hand washing, sanitization, all of those bits which our factory environments or our clinical trial setting environments, our HPUs have now been adapting to. So all of this is going to be leading us to a new working life in the backdrop of the fact that we do want to pick up studies that have been left behind. There's a reduction in oncology studies, which we know are very important, of about 48%. There's a reduction in dermatology studies of about 64%. All of these things will need to pick up, and therefore we as an industry need to make sure we communicate our readiness to take on these studies. And this is by making sure, again, we are using the approaches of AI. We are using digital monitoring as much as possible. We are able to bring in the components of confidence to the volunteers and to the study sponsors so that we can execute these very well. So I just thought it is important for us to talk about the fact that the clinical trial environment has both changed from a very high impact and a very high focus on COVID-19, but a lot more that is to work that is required for us to bring back the studies that we have put on the back burner.
I completely agree. I mean, both the points are very well said. That first thing is with the patient recruitment and enrollment, there is going to be huge challenge. We'll definitely talk about the reasons. We would like to talk about the reasons behind that. But along with that, you very rightly mentioned that we need to have a balanced approach. That, of course, right now the whole focus is on COVID-19, but at the same time, we have to make sure that efforts towards other diseases also goes on simultaneously, because eventually we have to focus on those diseases as well. So with Dr. Mahesh, if we can also touch base, like we have talked about numbers about how many clinical trials are going on for vaccines. Can we talk a little bit about the challenges? Because one good thing which has come out of it, and as Dr. Kiran Marthak has mentioned, that this one pandemic has actually brought the entire world together, especially biotech, healthcare, pharmaceutical industry together, and we are all working towards single goal. That we want to come up with some solutions in form of diagnostics. Of course, in diagnostic, we do have some success already. And then to come up with a drug or a vaccine specifically for COVID-19. Can we just talk about a few of the challenges that, in spite of the fact that the entire world, all the companies together, majority of the companies are running their programs on vaccine development and drug development. What are the challenges? Why should we why we still have to believe that it's going to take at least 6 months to 1 year to come up with a vaccine or some effective drug? So what are the challenges, especially with the nature of this virus, to come up with some effective vaccine? So let's start with vaccine, and then maybe we can talk about drugs as well. To start with you, Dr. Mahesh.
Yeah. So on the vaccine, let's understand the nature of coronaviruses a little bit. Coronaviruses in general are much more challenging because of the fact that coronaviruses do undergo mutations. Right. This is what happens with all viruses, but of course, coronaviruses also undergo the same. Now, the one opportunity that we of course have is that we are approaching this particular disease, COVID-19, from many multiple ways for vaccine solutions. So we have the mRNA vaccines that started off as the front runners in being able to start human studies. Then we have our traditional recombinant vaccines. We have the subunit vaccines. We have the live attenuated vaccines. So all of the different modalities of vaccine development that can be put to use for COVID-19 are being done. That said, some of these modalities, especially if we talk about the newer ones such as the mRNA vaccines, today there is no approved mRNA vaccine that is there, which means you will need to understand the safety profiles of these. Of course, the efficacy for sure, but the safety profiles even more so, and in as broad a population as we possibly can cover. So there is the component of doing the traditional studies that we would have always done, for which we would have done a lot more preclinical work. We would have done a lot of phase 1 studies, phase 2 studies, and phase 3 studies. What is happening now in the backdrop of COVID-19 is that all of these are getting condensed from a understanding of the vaccine candidate. People are working immensely hard in a collaborative manner. You're seeing a lot of collaborations that are coming across, which are academic industry collaborations, where the academics have a lot of the basic information on the discovery of the constructs that they are using for as vaccine candidates, and the industry is able to go ahead and generate a lot more of that material, get the studies started, and put it through the trials. This collaborative effort, while it is helping speed up things, is still going to be taking a lot of time relative to how we want the vaccine to be ready tomorrow. So given the fact that we will need to understand the safety profiles of any of these candidates, that is going to take some time. In that, there is this challenge that I already mentioned with regards to finding healthy human volunteers, depending on which world regions you go to, because we know some of the world regions have a much higher population that has been infected. Some of the other world regions have not. Yet you also want the patient, the gender as well as the race diversity to be covered. So you take you put all of that together, and you start to look at having the need for a good safety data set. After that, then you start to do what is looking into the potential of having the ability to produce this vaccine in a very large quantity, which is where you want to make sure that your doses are really optimized. If you are utilizing, let's say, twice the dose than what you can, that means you're reducing the availability of that vaccine by 50%. This is the component that comes in after you have gone through and identified your candidate and start to develop the process for manufacturing it at large scale and commercializing it. This is where, again, we need to be creative, we need to be innovative, and we need to be collaborative. Companies that do have the technology, companies and organizations that do have the technology need to look at scaling up through multiple ways, because this is what will make the vaccine available. Today, we are talking about, even after the infection numbers that we are seeing, the total population of the planet of about 7 billion is what we are going to have to make vaccines for. That's not a small task, even with the capacity that India alone has. India now provides most of the world vaccines, which are produced in one of the Indian factories, and we say that at least 1 in 2 children around the world has had an Indian vaccine. But despite all of that capacity, it's going to be that we need to learn to produce that at large scale in parallel while doing the phase 3 studies. So when you start to put all of these components together, the preclinical work, the safety studies, and the process development, the manufacturing, and then the final efficacy clinical trials, you are looking at a substantial time, which is, by the way, highly reduced from what it normally takes. The normal average time that we're talking for a vaccine to come on the market is anywhere between 7 to 10 years. If you're very accelerated, it may be 5 years. Now we are talking on the order of reducing that by a factor of 5. So these are some of the challenges that we have to go through in being able to bring those vaccine candidates onto the market. That said, I think there's still a good amount of promise that the industry is showing, because we have been able to read the news articles and progress that is going on. There are about 8 candidates that are already in the clinic, and that is in itself a very, very promising state for us, where we would like to be as an industry.
Right. So, Dr. Kiran, one of the point which we talked about is about the patient recruitment, especially a huge reduction nowadays we are seeing. And one of the important point what Dr. Mahesh covered is about finding the right patients, or the healthy volunteers for this even. So would you like to, from your experience, would you like to add up the reasons behind the challenges which we are facing right now in recruitment of patients, and what approach needs to be changed, or what adaptation most of the clinical CROs will have to make here onwards for patient enrollment and recruitment?
Yeah, considering that the population which is required, let's say the phase 1 study for vaccine, and considering it is a phase 1 study, and nobody exactly knows the dose which needs to be administered, and depending on the kind of the vaccine, whether it's a live attenuated vaccine or mRNA vaccine or adenovirus kind of a vehicle which is being used for the vaccine, to get the subjects, healthy subjects, to get into the study, considering the havoc that is created in the population, it may be difficult to get the healthy subjects to do the phase 1 study, because they might, because one of the things that which will be there in the informed consent, and that is it can cause anaphylactic reaction, it can cause the disease if it is not properly live attenuated, etc., etc. So that, I think, will be a major scare in the minds of the people to start in the phase 1 study. Second thing is when even for the drugs, if they are doing a phase 1 study, that will be difficult to get the phase 1 healthy subjects to be enrolled in this trial. Not only that, even for the subjects to come to the unit for getting enrolled in this, because many of these people, they might be staying in the red zone or in the containment area, and they may not be able to come out of their residences. So there are a lot of such things which can take place, and once they come, then we'll have to identify whether they are suffering from COVID-19 or not, whether they have any symptoms of it or not. All that we'll have to see that the subjects are really healthy before they're enrolled in the study. Because if any one of them is having any doubtful, or if they're suffering from the COVID-19 infection, it can affect all these healthy subjects who are participating in the study. And also the staff in the CRO can also be in danger of getting infected. So that is a very major challenge, and each CRO will have to get geared up for prevention of getting any infection in their staff, so that they have to wear the PPEs, use all the protective gears possible to see that they don't get infected. And also screening of the subjects, we'll have to be very, very strict, and we have to see that they are absolutely normal, and then only include them in the study so far as phase 1 study or even a bioequivalent studies are concerned. So far as patient studies are concerned, when they are in the units, in the hospitals, different places, there may be starting a new subject, the new patients are coming into the study is at present difficult, because they cannot visit the hospital. There are many such cases where the patients have spoken over the telephone. There are certain investigators are now using the video calls to talk to the patients, even for the follow-up in the clinical trial. there are many times now the follow-ups have been missed out, and the doctors or the investigators have spoken on the telephone with the patients, or even asked the patients to go to the nearby hospital or the clinic and speak to those doctors and provide the line of treatment. And even if even the supply of the drug certain time, because in many trials, which is a long-term trial like oncology or diabetes or hypertension, the treatment is given in a staggered fashion, and so patient may not have the drugs. So in such cases, now the drugs are being supplied by courier and other things. They are talking to them on the telephone, are trying to find out about the adverse events, serious adverse events, and even certain time now, even the getting the reports uh, is also difficult from the laboratories. So there are lot many challenges which are happening, and enrollment of the new patients, as Dr. Mahesh also mentioned, is is extremely slowed down. And unless the patient is staying somewhere nearby area, otherwise earlier days there were patients who were coming from the town B class to town A tertiary hospitals, etc., for treatment, for cycles, etc., which now is becoming very less because the patients cannot travel because of the restriction of travel because of the lockdown situation. So, and fortunately, the regulatory authorities have themselves drawn up the guidelines about how to carry out the trials in this kind of situations. So there will be major violations in the protocol, but that needs to be informed at the site, the operational team, and also inform the regulatory authorities, inform the ethics committee, inform the investigators, keep them informed in every aspect, and then carry out the trial in a very in in as much as following the GCP trials and also the regulatory guidelines. So, and I think this is something which is very challenging. We'll have to rely more on the risk-based monitoring, the remote monitoring. There will be, there some of the trials which was being audited by the QA, QC, etc., will be reduced to some extent. So we, as Dr. Mahesh said, will have to also depend on the artificial intelligence, and the patient would be needed to be provided with the digital instruments or the digital either on the mobile or something, develop some softwares by which patients can respond in even in their own local language about how they are feeling, their visionary scale, or any kind of scale which can be downloaded and given to the patients, and these patients can respond about how they are feeling, and that can be then introduced or that can be entered into the CRF, and then the follow-up can be carried out. So there will be entirely a different outlook in conducting the clinical trials.
Right, very well said, Dr. Kiran. So, same point to continue. I'll just take it to Dr. Mahesh. Even in your opening remarks, you did mention about AI, importance of artificial intelligence and digital platforms in clinical research setup. So, is it right to say that all the CROs who will not be able to adapt to this new requirement, or I won't say requirement, it is a necessity to implement suitable, appropriate AI solutions or digital platforms, they'll have to integrate into their clinical research studies scenario. If they're not able to do it, I think they're going to be left behind. Or would you like to comment on because they cannot be
Yeah,
any better time than to incorporate or integrate these platforms into CRO projects?
yeah. So let me actually identify 5 different things that I think CROs need to do
Mhm.
to catch up and be ready for the new ways of working, right? And this is specifically with regards to the environment in which we conduct clinical trials, and then I'll come to what they should be doing on their own campuses and what we are doing, for example, as a CRO. And of course, some of it when I talk about on our own site, it is also applicable to the rest of our business, which is the CMO business, the discovery services, the development services business. But let me talk more from the patient side of it and from the clinical trial side of it. First and foremost, we need to start looking at the fact that we will need a different way of approaching patients, right? It may be that we have to be prepared for mobile services a lot more, in-home clinical services. We will need to prepare for virtual ways of dealing and interacting with patients. And this is where your AI platforms come in. This is where your digital data collection platforms come in. Whether it is the e-diaries, whether it is your Fitbit, whether it is other patient monitoring software, and use of a lot more point of care devices which can upload data onto the systems is what is going to come in, right? The next, as the third aspect of it is, we as study coordinators and CROs are going to also have to look at changing the site mix that we have been using. We will need to be much more divergent, as Dr. Kiran also pointed out. We might have subjects who may be potentially your normal volunteers, but today are not available because of zoning restrictions or containment areas and things of that nature. So along with the technology oversight and the centralization of data collection, we'll also have to make sure that we broaden the base of whom we are approaching as our subjects. Next, we are also going to have to use the same AI and the same technology interface to further justify the sample size that we are looking at. We should now be in a phase where we are collecting a lot more data, and therefore use that statistically to justify and go after much more targeted subjects, much more specific subjects, improve the value of our studies, bring rationalize the numbers and rationalize the data sets that we are collecting. So I think that's the other part of bringing in the real world clinical practice and into trial design and improving the confidence of our trials. The next area that is very important for everyone to think through as they are designing is the use of the supply chain. Our supply chains are going to be challenging. It is not easy today to get medicines across from different parts of the world into wherever your centers are. After that, then it is also dispensing of that medicine in the environment, as we are talking about, if it is going to be in a more remote setting, if it is going to be in a more AI monitored or a digitally monitored environment, which is not just on your own site. And all of this to build confidence in your data set without impacting ethics, without impacting confidence of your data, without impacting the integrity of your study, will need our questionnaires to be revamped. Our basic infrastructure of how we are approaching things will itself need to be revamped. And so I think these are the components that I would say are very, very important for us to revisit and look at. And we've already started doing this in the Syngene environment. So, we feel that these are things that are going to be really important for the future. I'll comment then on the other bit of what is it that we're doing physically on our campuses. And physically on our campuses, we've started revisiting how we have put our physical distancing measures in place. Because we conduct a lot of BABE studies, for example, and this does require a slotting algorithm that we have gone and revisited. We've revisited all of the staff PPE that is being used to make sure that our staff is going to be comfortable with the environment that they're facing and are also going to be very well protected. This is also true then for our PPE and the setup for our volunteers. We are using a lot more of the self-declaration approaches to get good insights into the patients, and of course the use of the Arogya Setu app. All of these bits are things that we are doing on ensuring that the physical environment is one that is conducive to containing studies. Now, this is of course within the microcosm of what we have with regards to the clinical environment on our campus. A lot more that we are doing with regards to the overall environment of our campus, because we do conduct other studies and do support other clients outside of the clinical research clients. And there I just want to mention what we found very useful is we've implemented zoning measures. such that patients or our employees and our staff are limited to the zone that they work in. We have a huge campus with many buildings, and therefore we want to contain the movement of people so that we don't have unnecessary movement. So we've done zoning, and we all the way from pickup to drop off to food, and all of the interactions that staff need to have is happening within that zone that they are constricted to. To support this, we've overnight set up additional cafeterias, additional canteen areas, and we've also done this so that we can limit the number of people who are sitting on a given table. So all of the things around social distancing, all the way starting from pickup to the area that they work in, the food, the environment that they go to, how sample movement from the lab, let us say, to the production happens, has been reconfigured to ensure there is as minimum interactions across as possible. On top of this, then of course we have also gone into a more shift environment, so that in general our shifts enable that we bring down the volume of people on the site at any given point of time. So I'll just give these as some illustrative examples of what we've been taking on to support this kind of working environment.
No, I mean, I really appreciate and good to know the measures taken by Syngene, especially in this new normal scenario. But just a couple of points, if you can add up, that would really, because I think you touched based on most of the points and measures taken by the company. Any special precautions being taken considering the transportation of people?
So, we are actually a CRO, CMO, CDMO business, and sometimes we think that we've become a bus transport company because we've dramatically increased the number of vehicles that we are using to bring our people in. So 5,000 to 6,000 people that are coming on site. We are not yet at a full 100% operation, but despite that, we've increased very, very significantly, and we are now running more than 200 buses around the city. Just to bus our people. What we've made sure is that between every shift, there is a sanitization that happens of the bus. We made sure that there is no more than one person per seat on the bus. We've also put in similar restrictions for where our pickups for our staff is not in buses but in smaller cabs, where we put in the same sort of restriction. There's a communication that goes out to staff as to when their vehicle is arriving, so that they are not staying on the roads or in areas where they will be closer to other people for longer periods of time. So use of a lot more communication and a lot more tracking and intelligence to communicate when transport is coming. On our campus, when people are getting on the bus, we've put those restrictions and now spread out those areas as well. So there's a number of logistical steps that we've gone through to make sure that we maintain social distancing norms. We've made of course, the use of masks and hand sanitizers mandatory. We have staff checking in their temperature before they get on the bus with a digital thermometer, and both from home before they get on the bus, as well as at the end of the work shift before they get on the bus again once the work day is done. So there's a number of things here. I just wanted to give a few examples in relation to what you mentioned about logistics and transportation.
Sure. So, Dr. Kiran, would you like to add, I think Syngene being one of the bigger CROs can really afford actually to take all these measures which they have taken, and for the employee safety, and as well as to make sure that there is no spread of the disease further, and being able to provide that safe environment for their employees to work. And then as he rightly mentioned, even for manufacturing setup where the things are working in shift, between the shift sanitization process, which is a real great move, because that is must. And I'm sure there are scenarios where now we are thinking towards physical handover of responsibilities or data from one shift to the other shift. Even that should be avoided, just in keeping view with the COVID-19 situation. So, Dr. Kiran, I would like to know from your side, like this is for a bigger CRO, which they are able to do. how about smaller CROs? I'm sure there are a few things which are non-negotiable, be it a small CRO or a bigger CRO. Would you like to talk about the measures to be taken by smaller CROs to just make sure that the safety it takes the center stage for their employees and for their operations here onwards?
Yeah, what we have done and the other CROs, mid-size or the smaller CROs, the important thing is to stagger their reporting structure in the sense that when they are arriving into the unit or to the institute, it's a staggered approach so that some arrives at about 7 o'clock, others arrive at 8 o'clock, then 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, so that there is no rush as such. We do not organize any pickup like Syngene is doing it because the majority of the people are staying in and around Ahmedabad, so they have their own vehicle and they come over. Second thing is we not only a staggered reporting in the unit, but also about 30 to 40% of the staff or the people are working from home, and this has helped in reducing the crowding in the unit as such. We do check up the temperature at the time of arrival, and we also ask them to check the temperature at the time when they leave their home, and when they reach the institute or the unit, their temperature is checked again. Again, the hand sanitization works very well, and of course the distancing when they are arriving, they are not crowded. They have to keep a 1 meter distance at least between the person in front and behind. And then even in the unit where they are working, there is a social distancing. They have been staggered out so that they don't come in contact with each other. Even for the lunch time and all, again there is a staggering approach so that there are few people, and on each table a limited number of people who will sit for in a particular time period. And when they are going back, again their temperature is checked. And in case if there is anybody found to have a fever or anything like that, they are immediately reported to the a particular municipal clinic. At the same time, Arogya Setu have been downloaded on every individual's mobile, that they have to keep on checking it every day. And if there is any doubt, they have to show to their superiors. Those who are going to come in touch with the human beings, in the particularly the outside human beings like healthy subjects, they are being now trained to use the kit, how to use it, and how to wear it, and how to carry out, how will they will carry out their work which they are supposed to do. And that is, I think, because it's very easy to say that PPE you can wear, but I do know because when we go to the hospitals, and it's not that easy to wear and to work with it. It's pretty hot when you wear it, and it may be cumbersome in the beginning to carry out your work when you are wearing those PPE kit and the shield and the mask and everything, and the gloves and the leggings. So it is difficult, but they have to get used to it. So when we actually start working, and at the time when the actual work will start, I'm sure there will be a lot of restrictions. And what we heard, and Dr. Mahesh is probably aware also, that CRO is doing a lot of things about uh, when to start working, and once we start working, how they have issued a guideline about what kind of work and how that work will to be carried out. And I'm sure any municipal commissioner in any big city will not allow 100% capacity to work with. They may start with maybe 30%, increase to 50%, then 70%, something like that. So yeah, under those circumstances, how to work and how to carry out the work in a very defined area. So I think there are a lot of challenges, but I think with the proper training and the guidance, we should be able to overcome it.
So one thing is now sure that actually with all these measures being taken, and then every company will have to take, cost is going to increase. We all have to agree that either we are talking of PPEs or we are talking of logistics. To in and even as you rightly mentioned at the end of your views, suggestions that we cannot work at 100% capacity. It depends on individual state, but at least every company will have to start with 35 to 40% of their capacity. So all this is going to add up to the expense part, and how this. So from both of you experts, would like to hear about the strategies to deal with this increase in expense, sudden expense for quite some time. And at the same time, we are struggling right now with business to get overseas clients and to run those studies. So how are we going to balance, or how are we going to deal with this increase in expense versus carrying out our operations and yet be focused on the business? To start with, Dr. Mahesh.
So I would say that you're absolutely right. There is a impact here of cost that is coming. One of the things that Dr. Kiran mentioned, and I'll just add to that because it's a good practice, and I think people should know. So on our campus, while we do have buses that we are taking care of sanitizing, the handover, we have kept some time in between people, so that again the sanitization of the work area as well. We are also sanitizing individual vehicles coming into the campus now, and all of this of course costs money and does may increase our cost of operations. At the same time, I think we have to recognize that we as an industry are in a much better place than some of the other industries to still serve the needs that are there today. And those needs are there from two perspectives. One are COVID specific needs that are there. And as we said, those there will be a lot more trials that need to be conducted. There's a lot more molecules that have to be evaluated. There's a lot more vaccines that have to be evaluated, and a lot more tests that the world is going to continue to use. So there is that additional work that will be coming for the pharmaceutical industry in general, and therefore, of course, the CRO CMO business. Uh, uh, Now compare and contrast that to some of the other industries where those opportunities are not there, and therefore we need to make sure that we do those investments of the additional cost in ensuring that our workforce is safe, in ensuring that our workforce is able to continue to deliver on these studies, on these programs. We don't want like we said at the very beginning of the conversation, we don't want any of the other programs that have been put on the back burner to stay on the back burner for much longer, because those therapies, those treatments, those discovery programs, all of those need to continue to go on. So I think yes, we do have to look at it as an investment, so that we can continue to build on the basis that we have and bring new therapies to the market. And that's really the way to look at this approach. Of course, on top of that, then we do need the government support to make policies and to provide the right level of support, especially for the MSME industry, that will help them sustain through this period. And if the government is looking at prioritizing any of the industries, these are the industries that they need to prioritize, because once we are able to deliver better on therapies, once we are able to conduct better trials, produce more molecules, this is what is actually going to get us out of this crisis, among other things. So there's a bit about the approach that we need to take, what prioritization we need to do for our own staff. There is the component of measures that we need to do with our sponsors, with our clients, to make sure that their programs continue to go on. And then there is the component of what needs to happen from a policy perspective, so that where we were losing time before, we don't, and therefore we are not being inefficient at a higher operating cost that we are at today. and therefore bring more and more of our staff back at work with all of the norms around social distancing and get back to full levels of operation.
No, completely agree with you, Dr. Mahesh. And from government's perspective, we all feel that the special package which they have announced just a couple of days ago for MSME, huge chunk which they have announced as uh, collateral guarantee-free loans to MSME sector. I think that is a right step. So before we get into concluding remarks, very quickly, can we have a few points or few views from Dr. Kiran about your take on increase in expense versus decline in business for CRO? What is your view on that? And then probably we'll just one last point we have to discuss, and then we will conclude today's discussion. So over to you, Dr. Kiran.
Yeah, I think important thing is to continue with the business. In the beginning, it will be on the lower side because of the social distancing and getting the subjects and all of that is very important. But we will have to find out the ways of working in a cost-effective manner. The yield has to be on the higher side, and that is where all the best heads of the organization will have to work shoulder to shoulder and see that the uh, the work should happen, and it should be happening in a timely manner within a stipulated budget. And there will be increase in the cost, but one will have to work out that how to absorb that cost. Certain time maybe increase the cost depending on the kind of the study. Certain time or some reduction even in the salary structure. We may need a revision of the salary structure to some extent. And so HR will have to play a very major role in this, along with the operational people, because the operational guys will have to see that how they produce best in a limited resources, because the resources will be scanty. And that is where I think the their tactics and the strategy which will play a very major role. But of course, there will be some effect to some extent on the costing of the study. That's what I personally feel so.
Great. So before I request both of you for your concluding remark, just one point which I feel we should also use our scientific judgment, and it would be really great to hear your both of your views very quickly on where on one side we are saying that more than 80% cases are asymptomatic for COVID-19, which that means the patients doesn't exhibit any symptoms. And on other side, there are guidelines and safety measures we are also taking. Most of the CROs is to check the temperature and to look for visible symptoms of cough and cold. So I would like to hear from both of you. Do you really think that going forward, this is the right time for government to really revise their policies and open up this diagnosis beyond government labs and private labs, and open it up to even for CROs and all? Because when you have 80% population, I mean the patients asymptomatic, what are the chances that we are actually we are not allowing COVID positive patients, or we are accurately capturing the healthy employees only and allowing them to work when most of them could be asymptomatic? So do you really think going forward this surveillance or the testing should be open, and CROs and other pharma industries will have to participate in this move with government for surveillance? To start with you, Dr. Mahesh.
Yeah, so I think you hit on a very important point. I think no conversation around COVID can be complete without talking about the need for testing. And whether that number of asymptomatic is 70%, 80%, or whatever is the actual number, which we really don't know, we need to understand that. And we need to understand that both from the perspective of preventing the spread, but also making sure that we have the epidemiological status of each of the environments so that our resources can be deployed appropriately. And when I mean resources, I'm referring not just to the resources of the hospital networks and the governments, but also our own resources as employers. So I think both of those come in very, very handy. I just want to mention a couple of things that we have done towards that in Syngene. So we got a lab qualified as NABL accredited and ICMR approved, so that we could start doing RT-PCR testing in-house in Syngene. And so that's something that we felt that the government should not fall short of testing facilities, and wanted to do our bit that we can with regards to making that available. On top of that, the additional constraints that were felt as being there was about having kits and having reagents available. We have started to make sure that we produce some of the reagents that are difficult to produce and were not being produced sufficiently in India, such as the probes and primers that go into the RT-PCR kit. So we've repurposed some of our facilities for doing that, so that testing resources are not falling short in the country. And then we need to also make additional tools available to your point on testing, which is where we have taken up ELISA assay development, which is something that we are working on, which will bring the cost of testing down, and also give a lot more around the status of who are the subjects who have already seen the infection, so that we start to get a lot more understanding of the epidemiology. So many of these things that have been put together by the private industry and the private network does need to influence, and the government does need to push for a lot more testing. So I totally agree with you that the testing needs to be done at a much higher level. We should not be shy of understanding the environment that we are in, both from the use of the RT-PCR, which is the more diagnostic test, as well as the more epidemiological and the status of previous infection history understanding from the serological tests that are available. Of course, we need to make sure that these come at the highest quality, so that the tests are reliable, both from the kits that are used, as well as from the testing environment in which the tests are done. But no doubt that we do need to make sure that we use all of the resources that we have to increase the amount of testing that we're doing.
Thank you. Dr. Kiran, would you like to add your views to that?
Yeah, I think I fully agree that there are 70 to 80% of the subjects who are symptomless. But at the same time, what we need to understand is the availability of the resources, particularly the test kits. There are very limited number of test kits available at present, and that we have to use judiciously, so that we target the population where it can be best used, which can be best indicative. So if there is a symptomatic patient, I would rather do the testing in him or her than to do the test in the subject who does not have any symptoms. Though given a choice, I would do in every subject that I would like to carry out. But because of the limited resources, limited number of kits available, and therefore, what is important is to make the best use of the available kits to a desirable type of patients. So I would like to see that how many are positive among the symptomatic patients, because there are more chances of coming positive than those which are symptomless. So I would like my kits to be used for where I can get maximum positive results, so that I can treat them, and they are the one who are likely to spread the disease more than the one which are symptomless. So it's a question of balancing between the symptomatic treatment and symptomless subjects. At the same time,
if I can interrupt,
yeah,
go ahead. No, I was just going to add however, today the statistics are the following, that we are not even testing 1 lakh patients per day.
Yes.
And my labs alone, and Syngene, as you may have seen in the news, is tied up with my labs. My labs alone has the capacity to produce more than 1 lakh kits a day. So we are not using all of that capacity and putting even that to use. Now, if that was all put to use and then we were falling short of capacity, then I agree with your point that we may need to prioritize. But today we are not even fully utilizing all of the kits that are available, and these are indigenously manufactured kits.
Yeah, but here, the kind of instructions which are going out from ICMR and the government regulatory authorities. Because I agree with you, there may be certain kits which are not being utilized, but they have put it down a very strict criteria. Even in my practice, when I refer the subject or a patient to any of the laboratory, they ask the person to fill up a big questionnaire. They will evaluate the patient, and then only they will conduct they will carry out the test. So there are a lot of issues where the instructions going out from ICMR and the health authorities, including the instruction going out from even the municipal commissioner of a particular city. So I think that needs to be taken care. But at the same time, one has to balance it out and see that the quality wise and the number of kits which are being produced are being used properly.
Yeah, and I think that's where I would say that our role comes in, right? So we as scientific body experts as well, in terms of, either we bring our manufacturing knowledge to say what's our capacity, either we bring some knowledge on the performance of the kits as diagnostic experts. So the overall pharmaceutical, biotech, diagnostics, vaccine manufacturing industry does need to have their voice heard so that the policy decisions that are coming, as you're saying, from ICMR or from the local municipalities, are taking all of this kind of information into consideration and driving those decisions appropriately. And it may be that we actually need to look at a certain environment where things are looked at a little differently than another. I mean, we all know in Wuhan, they have decided to test in the entire population, 11 million in a week, and this is unbelievable. But they're going for it because they know that this is the way to contain it. And so in certain local areas, we may need to make such different choices based on what we know epidemiologically, based on the rate of the disease spread, and we may need as a country to channelize our resources in that area. Today in our RT-PCR lab, we started out with receiving samples from Bangalore, but now we're receiving samples from other parts of Karnataka as well. So we are getting into that mode of resource sharing, and this is what we need to do so that we can go after those hotspots, those areas that are most highly hit.
Absolutely. If given a choice, I would go to the various zones instead of getting the samples. I will go with the mobile lab. Like I just saw today, the IIT has now got a mobile lab. They go to the various interior places where the sending the samples may be difficult. And IIT has worked out the plan by which they are doing the testing. They are making use of artificial intelligence. They are also taking the X-ray. And with a minimum radiation, they are trying to find out even if there is anything wrong in the chest if the patient is symptomatic. So instead of getting the samples, I would rather go to the various zones and see that like I have the test in various places as such. So I think it's a question of logistically getting things organized. People at the level of municipal commissioner of a particular city or even in the B town areas, they will have to work in a more systematic manner.
Sure. So in fact,
and one effort that we are doing in that area, I'll just mention this because we started talking about availability of resources, and at least on the kids side of it, I'll mention that we formed a national body of innovation that is headed by Kiran Marthak to make sure that at least there is a good understanding of all these resources that come together on availability of kits and kit components, which can be sourced indigenously, and really leverage the innovation strength of the country.
Absolutely.
In fact, I would mention at this point in time, because I feel diagnostic is completely a separate topic, and it needs a separate discussion altogether, because starting from going for a serology versus an RT-PCR confirmatory test, from as Dr. Kiran just mentioned, taking this entire thing to a mobile van kind of thing, where mobile lab can be used, so surveillance can be done even in a better way. But I feel we'll definitely would like to have a separate discussion purely on diagnostic, and then we would really be honored to have both of you again for that discussion. But right now, I think we have in great length we have discussed about the impact overall global impact on pharmaceutical industry, and especially how CRO industry is trying to cope up with this new normal scenario with COVID or after COVID. So I would now request both of you, Dr. Mahesh, followed by Dr. Kiran, to let's have your concluding remarks in form of advisory. Again, few points which you feel like how a CRO should prepare themselves to deal with this pandemic crisis situation, both in terms of few non-negotiable things where a small, big, or a large CRO will have to abide by, and a few things how they can channelize or re-strategize their business operations and then get back to new normal. So very quickly, if I can have concluding remark first from Dr. Mahesh and then followed by Dr. Kiran.
I was going to offer that for the concluding remarks, we can go with Dr. Kiran first. I've been, but I'm okay either ways. Dr. Kiran, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead, Dr. Mesh.
So, okay, I'll summarize without going through the actual tips of what we have done, because that is something that we have covered. I'll summarize it in the form of, because today it's all the world of the corona and the COVID, which is the C and the C that we are all worried about. Is talking about 5 C's that we all need to keep in mind. And the first one is collaboration. I think this is the time to collaborate. This is not the time to work individually. This is the time to collaborate within industry, of course, certainly, and it is not about going for competition, but it's more going for collaboration versus competition. It's also the time to collaborate between industry and academia. So we for example have tied up with CCMB to make sure that we increase the scale of testing through more different approaches to testing, and going after massive pooling opportunities. Apart from collaboration, the next one I want to talk about is communication. I think it's really important that we are communicating immensely at this time, and this communication is on multiple levels. One is communication to our staff, so that they know of all the measures that we are taking. It's also communication with our clients, so that our clients know we are open for business. We are able to take your studies on. We don't want you to be slowing down your programs. We understand how important those are for you, and these are the measures that we have taken to make sure that we can continue on your studies, on your programs, on your projects, without impacting the safety of our staff. There's also communication that is very important for us to do back to the authorities, and which was the last point that we were starting to talk about. Is let's communicate what we are learning about the use of tests, about the use of how programs are progressing, how many resources or what sort of support we need, and then it is of course for the authorities to work both on policy and making resources available to us. Then it's a matter of the next C that I want to talk about is compliance. We do want to make sure, and this is something that we are making sure all of our staff is aware of, that we will not take any shortcuts on compliance. Yes, we are in a different environment. Yes, we are working in COVID times, but that does not give us the opportunity to take any compliance risks. We still have to meet all of our compliance expectations, so that the integrity of the work that we do, the quality of the results that we produce, the confidence that our clients and customers have in us will not be hampered in any way, shape, or form. And then the last one I would say is consolidation. I think there's a lot of consolidation of information that needs to happen, and one of the examples that I'll give is consolidation of information from a surveillance perspective. We need to support that. We as CROs, CMOs actually have a lot of opportunity to bring in information, whether it is on how study levels have changed or how client expectations have changed. We need to bring that market information in a consolidated manner, which can further help drive the policies or the implementation of testing, or the spreading out of government resources. So if we take these measures into our ways of working and realize that we as an industry play a very pivotal role in shaping how we come out of this crisis or how we learn to live with this crisis, only then will we be really successful, and will start to make a difference in this world today is extremely scared, extremely worried, and concerned about what the new normal and what the future holds. So with that, I'll stop and I'll offer it to Dr. Kiran for his comments.
Thank you. I think so far as I'm concerned, for me, most important aspect is to make use of this time. We are, of course, only on the clinical research and pharmacovigilance, and we are not on the manufacturing side or drug discovery side, but mainly on the clinical trials. And what I would like to make best use of this time is to keep the tempo of the employee build up the way it was, and they should not get discouraged, they should not get depressed that I'll be out of job, I'm sitting idle, nothing of that kind. And this is the best time to educate them by various sources, make use of artificial intelligence, make use of digital resources by which they can get themselves trained on various aspects, not only science, not only clinical research, but many other things which needs to be educated, make them better than what they were. And I think that will be a very important thing, and it will boost up their morale, boost up their thinking process, and make them better than what they were. So that is very important. In communication, that is one of the important things. Second is to communicate to regulatory authorities about what exactly we are doing and how it is helping the industry and how we are taking care of the patients and the healthy subjects and the employees, so that there is a prevention of the disease in the people that we are dealing with. So these two are very important aspects. And of course, the sponsors should know everything that what we are doing. And many sponsors are very curious. Even they send an emails to us that what kind of actions are you taking? How are you protecting your employees? How are you protecting your subjects? And when we write to them, they really appreciate what we are doing. So they are keen. And I think at certain level, then the budget or the money is not that important. Once you are doing something good for the humanity, good for the patients, healthy subjects, I think then the money becomes of the secondary importance. So that is, I think, we need to take care. So keeping everybody informed, boost up the morale of the people who are working with you, keep that tempo going, and slowly, when we start opening up, they will be much more agile and much more careful in putting their best. So that is what I would like to convey the message.
So thank you, Dr. Kiran, and thank you, Dr. Mahesh. It was really great to have a consolidated discussion around the impact of COVID globally on pharmaceutical industry as well as the CRO industry, and more importantly, it was really great to learn organizations like Syngene, what they have done to really combat this COVID-19 situation, and what measures they have taken to reopen or to even enhance their operations. So thanks to you, Dr. Kiran and Dr. Mahesh, and I'm sure the discussion would be really useful for the rest of the CRO industries across country and maybe across world. A lot of things they will have to learn from to take home messages from today's discussion. So thank you once again for your precious time and interesting discussion what we had, and hopefully in future we will have you back again for maybe some other interesting similar discussion. So thank you, Dr. Mahesh, and thank you, Dr. Kiran.
Thanks, Deepak. Really appreciate taking the time. I think it's an important topic that we've discussed, and hopefully views that we share are useful. I also want to thank the Boston group itself for actually taking the initiative for setting up such a conversation. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhagat. Thank you.
Thank you.